Hi, welcome to the podcast Beyond the Ballot, a Lone Wolf production. This is where we showcase local politics by providing a platform for elected officials and candidates. Today's episode is sponsored by Chairman Fannin and the Carmel Republican Committee. Want to make a real difference in Carmel and Mahopac? Join the movement shaping your hometown's future. Follow the Carmel GOP on Facebook to stay informed, get involved, and help strengthen the Republican voice right here at home. I'm proud to introduce a returning guest to the show, Jake D'Angelo, candidate for Putnam County Legislator of District 5. Welcome back.
Well, it's good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Since the last time you were here, I've added a few routine questions to my dialogue. The first question is, who have been your mentors or role models in your life?
Well, my two mentors, one would be my grandfather. He's truly, well, both actually, my grandfather and my grandmother. I won't leave her out either. They've both been, a lifeline to me. Since I was a kid. And I truly believe they are the embodiment of the American dream. They are both raised with, a lot of brothers and sisters in the Bronx, sharing socks and underwear. We're able to come here, to Putnam County, build a very successful business, just the two of them. And we're able to provide for, me, my brothers, my parents. They truly are what the American dream is all about. And I believe that's what I'm fighting for. And I would say that my other mentor would be Jesus Christ, because no one has walked this planet with the sole intention of loving, of caring, healing, teaching, and forgiving the way Jesus did. And I think in a world like we have today, I would say that he is my biggest mentor to try to be a little bit like him.
To emulate him.
Well, it's a very tall task. But if you could do a little bit of what Jesus did, just a little bit of it, just try, the world would be a pretty good place.
I agree. The other lighthearted question is, what is something people might be surprised to know about you, like a particular hobby or talent that you have?
Well, I could play a few instruments. I could play the guitar and the piano. It's something I've just kind of always, just like I pick up on and off. I've done since I was a kid. And I play in a men's baseball league still. So, who else plays in that league is Will Truitt up in Dutchess County. He's the chair of the legislature. He's running for comptroller. So if anyone in Dutchess County is watching this, make sure you go vote for Will on November 4th.
So before we move on to the more political natured questions, is there anything else you want to share or revisit that you think the voters would like to hear from the last time you were on?
Well, I would say we've got to, remember that we still have an election in November. We won really big in June. It was a 26, 27 point margin. It couldn't have been done without, all the hard work from, people volunteering, knocking on doors, going to the community and listening to them, right? Being somebody who's like, I want to hear what you have problems with. I want to hear how I can fix them. And, everyone came out and really supported. But it's important that we do the same in November because these local elections, especially in an off year, it brings out a rather intimate turnout. And so races are very competitive. And I know we're in a very red district and Republicans and conservatives or independents or Democrats who vote that way will typically maybe sit it out after the primary. We can't do that. We all got to come out in a big way and make sure we exercise our right and vote.
Let's dive into it. You had successfully beat the incumbent of District 5, Greg Elner, yes, and have naturally advanced to be the Republican and conservative candidate in the general election. What do you think propelled you into having this success?
I think it back to just what I said. I think it was being willing to really listen to the voters. Listen to my neighbors essentially. I knocked so many doors. I mean, I don't think you should see the pair of shoes. I made sure to wear the same pair of shoes every time I knock doors. You got to see what they look like, and it's because I genuinely wanted to hear what their concerns were, what they would like to see us do, in our county, in the town of Carmel, and, in Lake Carmel, which is part of the district as well. And I lended a listening ear. I find that politicians don't do that. They're always like, well, we're going to do this and that. And I'm very smart. And I think that's what I ran against the first time. I offered something that said, hey, listen, I share a lot of the same, struggles as you all. And I want to fix them because, I'm a young man, and to raise a family here of my own, which is my biggest goal, we have to tackle the affordability crisis head on. And that's not going to come with, in the box ideas. It comes to listening and it comes down to, having a well put together plan.
As you know, your opponent was a guest on this show, and I'm assuming you watched that episode. With that being said, there were a few talking points.
It was a long one.
He holds the record. There were a few talking points that acknowledged your campaign and essentially warrant further clarification. The first subject matter is about property taxes and how it ties into one of your main campaign planks. You've spoken a lot about homeowners struggling with property taxes, but records show that you do not share in this hardship. How do you address the concerns of voters who question whether you truly understand what it's like to endure this responsibility?
Well, I think it's a really loaded thing for people to say, because
I've heard it more than once, so I've
absolutely that's fine. I think it's fine. We're addressing something people say. I mean, look, landlords don't look at an $18,000 a year property tax bill and decide, we're going to furlough that. This isn't going to go into their monthly rent. When you pay rent, you're paying towards a tax bill, right? So you may not be going to town hall and paying the bill. The high property tax is what drives some of the record high, rents around here. I mean, you can't get it, in someone's basement for less than $2,700 most of the time. So that, and at one time that was a mortgage around here. So, to say that, renters aren't taxpayers is, really disenfranchising to renters. I don't know if, my opponent is trying to say that if you're a renter, you shouldn't have a voice in your government, or that maybe he wouldn't recognize you as a legitimate taxpayer. So maybe he wouldn't really care about policy and how it would affect a renter. But I do. All taxpayers, whether you're paying the tax bill directly or you're getting hit over the head with high rents because of property tax.
Throughout the interview with your opponent, there were several instances in which he alluded how closely you're tied to the Putnam County executive, Kevin Byrne. One comment had been Kevin Byrne, along with Matt Slater, the assemblyman, had thrown you the recent fundraiser. What do you say to this?
Well, I'll start with the first one. I worked part-time for free, voluntarily, for Kevin Byrne when he was in the assembly, because I philosophically...
You know what? Before you go into a whole dialogue, I want you to directly answer the question. Did they throw you the fundraiser?
No.
Okay. Now continue.
No.
I just want to cut to that.
Yeah, no. Well, look, he seems to claim he has a real good campaign team around him, and they could go on to the New York State Board of Elections, line item. You have to report your expenditures line item by line item. So they could see every expense, just how much I spent and just how much I took in on the night of my fundraiser. And they will clearly see that bill being paid by me, money in and money out. Our New York State Assemblyman and our county executive were my guest speakers. And I mean, those are two of, I think, the greatest leaders, not just here in Putnam County, but I think you may find anywhere in the state. So I was honored to have them be my guest speaker. And to tie why people think, Kevin and I are so close is, I guess you could say I was born into politics working with Kevin. And it wasn't because of any, opportunistic angle. It was, I truly believe philosophically in his policy. So I'm sure there's going to be a lot of times he and I see eye to eye, and I find it to be an honor. I mean, look, we've got the best county executive in history. I don't care what anybody can say about him. We've got the lowest property tax rate in 20 years. A massive cut just happened to the property tax levy, the largest in Putnam County history. We're sharing sales tax revenue. Our county tax bill is the healthiest it's ever been. So I don't take that exactly as an offense. I almost take that as a compliment to be even, compared to Kevin Byrne. So I hope I could, put together policy and a record in the legislature, that could somewhat, match up with what he's done as executive and as assemblyman.
Before I interrupted you, you were talking about volunteering.
Yeah.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, no. Well, it just adds to the fact that it's because I philosophically believe, in his policy. I literally said, I was helping run my family's small business, and so I once or twice a week I'd get the guys started in the morning and make sure they had their materials and whatnot, and then I'd run over to his office in Brewster, and I just did anything I could. I'd help draft legislation, proclamations, we would do a lot of research to respond to constituents with their, email inquiries or, things of that nature. So because I was passionate about it and I philosophically agreed again with his policy. I didn't want money. It was not an opportunistic thing. It was me genuinely wanting to join up the fight and, do right for our community and our country.
Another topic that came up during the interview with your opponent was how you secured the conservative line endorsement without even interviewing. He said that he was the only candidate to actually interview with them. Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, his, campaign manager is a conservative party boss, chairman. So he should know this. But they, in their bylaws, can do phone interviews. And I wasn't, as similar to me not seeking the Republican endorsement, because the timing factor of my announced to run came late. So I missed that process. I also missed the ability to go up in front of the conservative because I wasn't going to run at first. They interviewed him. He didn't get it, I think, for a reason. They were going to leave the line open. And then when I got involved, I had the opportunity, because it was very last minute, to jump on a call to talk with the executive board, and I was given the endorsement. So again, I think that could also tell you everything you need to know, that my opponent went in front of the Conservative Party and didn't get the nod. Even when there was seemingly no one else to give it to, they were never going to give it to Greg Elner. They were going to just leave it open. That's what they thought of my opponent.
So I promise during this interview, not going to always be on the defense. I do want to talk about your campaign initiatives and the positives you want to bring to your district as well as the county as a whole. That being said, in the past, you said you're not a politician. What does that mean to you?
Well, that means to me that I am a project superintendent for a large general contractor. So I'm in the construction industry, and I currently do not hold a political office or a job in a political office.
Okay. I also want to bring up the fact that your opponent insinuated he has no further ambitions to run for a higher position eventually. What does your future look like? Do you have any greater ambitions in the political realm?
Right now, my main focus is what we can do here in the county. I think we've been on such a good path in terms of, like I touched on, the record-breaking tax cuts, tackling affordability, and head on in a place that I want to raise a family of my own. I want to join the fight, and I want to do what's best for our community. As far as where the future takes me, I don't know. We'll see. I mean, my goal when I got into politics was to really save the American dream, and I know more than anything that starts more at the local level than it does in Washington. These are policies enacted at the local level are the ones you feel the most. They hit home. So, look, I'm going to do as much time as the community while they vote. I'll do as much time as they allow me to have in office. And, when my time runs out there, if they think I'm deserving to go and, continue up the fight somewhere else, they'll make that decision. But as of right now, this is my first ever race. This is what I'm focused on. There's nothing on a whiteboard in terms of where I want to go next. I'm here and now.
I had asked your opponent spontaneously what anti-establishment meant to him. He essentially said that he's not in the good old boys club, and he's obviously on the Democrat ticket, which is obviously the minority in this one-party rule system. This is a two-pronged question. What does anti-establishment mean to you? And when you talk about insiders, are you referring to specific policies or just the general culture in government?
Well, I would say the culture in our government, from the inside point of view. I mean, we keep talking about me being on a committee as a bad thing, but I got in there to make my vote count, to kind of break this succession plan that, these party bosses have had since before I was born, right? I wanted to be a vote in that room that was against that, and that was one of integrity, that would cast my vote to endorse candidates that are the ones most suited for the job. And, to insinuate that I might be with the good old boys club is laughable. I ran against the endorsed Republican candidate. I ran against the sitting vice chairman of the legislature. I ran against the establishment and I won. And we'll do it again in November. But the funny thing is look, I ran against we'll call it the establishment. And now my opponent is doing everything he can to be opportunistic with the establishment. So, to claim being, look, my grandfather has an old saying, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. And ultimately my opponent went from, before I entered the race, really, really stancing himself against Greg Elner. And now, Greg Elner and the good old boys are making phone calls to Republicans around Kent to try and get Brett in to spite me. We've got the Kent GOP, which there's been a lot of people who are warm to me there, but they won't even put me on flyers. They won't include me in fundraisers. They won't invite me to anything they do. I'm being completely cast astray. Meanwhile, they will parade around, fundraisers, introducing Brett to, union presidents and whatnot. It's look, I don't want to get too into the weeds on it. I don't think it's worth the voters' time to hear this stuff, but yeah, no. I think right now in our current politics, I am the exact opposite of the establishment.
Do you think Brett, the fact that he's trying to appeal to all party lines, that his likeness could be compared to a Trojan horse for the Republicans?
It's a little bit of a divisive question. He doesn't have a record. I mean, neither do I. We're both there. So I can't say that he's got past policy that would lean too far left. But the internet is forever, and you could go through his postings and you could see where he politically aligns himself. And I would say that it is certainly not with the Republican Party. Furthermore, voter registration. He was always a libertarian or independent, whatever he says. Why not run as an independent then, right? But to, in this political climate, choose to join the Democrats conveniently right before you start going to the legislature and using, public comment as like a way to make a highlight tape for yourself on the campaign trail. You switch to Democrat in this political climate. But then you distance yourself from it. Now, it's one thing if you're like a lifelong Democrat and you say, okay, they've strayed a little too far left. I'm just going to come back to center. But you were always in the center, supposedly. And then in this political climate, you become a Democrat. So maybe he's not a Democrat, but then that leads me to believe he's angling. He's right. He's being opportunistic. He's being a politician, right? So that's to say Trojan horse, I think is a little divisive.
Those are my words, not yours.
Right. It could be. I don't think it's worth the risk. I think, look, with me, you know what you're going to get. I have been consistent in my messaging. I've been consistent in who I've aligned myself with. I've been consistent in my party registration from the very beginning. When you see Jake D'Angelo, you by now should absolutely know what you're going to get. I think my opponent has spent a lot of time headline chasing. He spent a lot of time pandering to different, parties and different groups. And I've been around politicians for years now, and that's kind of exactly what we're getting with my opponent.
Your campaign mailer said that you're bringing a wrecking ball to the legislator. Are you talking about reform, restructuring, or something else entirely?
We're talking about reform. We're talking about, undoing some of the things that the legislature has been, right. So the no pay raises for politicians, that's a big thing I tokened, but that was actually Greg Elner's coin that he had tokened. When Greg Elner took office, loosely, the legislature made $43,000 a legislator, which is still I think a fortune for a part-time job. He's leaving office in January. And the legislators will be making near $50,000 a year now. So, in 3 years, these people who claim to be, Republican conservative, no pay raises for politicians, for the people, may you say, they went against it and they've raised their own pay $7,000. That's a marginal, that's a marginal percentage raise when you go from $43,000 to $50,000. So we want to undo that. I would look to try to even bring down the pay. I don't know if it would pass. I think we'd have enough people in there.
Would that make you unpopular to the other legislators?
It's not my concern. First off, I think I'm already pretty unpopular. I think I'm already pretty unpopular with those guys. But no, my job is actually to be for the people, not just say it, do it. That's what I did. I knocked doors. I talked about it. I told them what I wanted to do. My job's not to make friends on the legislature. I don't need to be friends with my coworkers. I need to get the job done and do what's best for the taxpayer.
In most, if not all the interviews, I bring up transparency and how essential it is for the voters. This is another two-pronged question. The first being, your campaign's primary filings reported $0 raised or spent during a race against Greg Elner. Can you help voters understand how that's possible and what happened with your campaign's financial disclosure? And the second question, which speaks to your platform, how would you exercise transparency?
Okay, well, so for the first one is a really simple one. The only thing I had bought was literature. It was the palm cards and signs, and our printing company didn't bill us until the end of the summer. So there was no primary expenditure. The bills are being paid, so that'll all show up. And people are obviously keeping a close eye. Not close enough because they think the assemblyman and the county executive paid for my fundraiser. But if they'll go back to check that, they'll see those expenditures. There was no actual transaction. So unless I were to lie about spending money that wasn't spent, there was no expenditure before the primary.
Okay, and the second question.
All right. What was I'm sorry, go again.
Which speaks to your platform. How would you exercise transparency?
I would make sure that the issue of live streaming and public comment really could become untouched, right? It's in the legislative manual, but legislative manual only takes a simple majority and a chairman to change, and it changes often. We see it all the time. Yeah, I'd like to see this go into our charter. That takes that's going to take a little bit of work. It's going to be more than a simple majority. You'll need something of a super majority. You also need the county executive. So that means if it becomes a situation where they try to undo it, well, they have an uphill battle to climb with that. And that wouldn't exactly be the most popular thing with the public. So I think really you don't just put transparency into the legislative handbook, you put it into law.
Okay. And my last defensive question is, it's been mentioned that you've attended only a handful of legislative meetings. Is this true? And if so, why?
Yeah. Well, for starters, you can watch live streams. That's why I want to protect it so much. It's great after work. You could watch it and see how it functions. I don't think you need to go there in person to see what's going on, right? And I understand our legislature because I have been watching. I didn't fall out of the sky because someone said, hey, you should run for something. I've been watching for years. These people talk in the back room. They exclude the other legislators. It's the five of them, including Greg, who's now gone. They go into the back room. They talk. They don't caucus with the Republicans. They don't even bother talking to the Democrat. They do now for other reasons, but we won't get into that. And they come out, they sit, and they have every decision made. They have their agenda. Going and talking to them is not going to make them change their minds. These people don't care. That's the kind of reform we're looking to bring. So when you go to the legislature and you talk, but you're not facing the legislators, you're turning and looking at the crowd and you're being a showman. And so I opted to not do that. I watched from home after work and just, as I always do when I watch, laugh at some of the stuff that goes on and shake my head and say, well, I can't wait to get in there.
I've had several guests on the show: Greg Elner, Jackie Anabi, Christian Russo, Mike Kazari, Kevin Byrne, and forgive me if I'm forgetting anyone, that spoke about the immense triumph of the sharing of the sales tax amongst the different municipalities. Mm-hmm. Could you expand on this and how it relates to your campaign?
Well, I think it helps relieve the tax burden, right? These people, what happens is you pay into your sales tax, right? The county sits on it and hoards it. And what happens is the towns I find carry the burden the most. A lot of the infrastructure projects that get done to support and boast economic development, it's done at the town level, not the county level. So what happens is they put up the money, the sales tax generates, but they never get the money back. So then what happens when you need a road paved or when something goes up, inflation, whatnot, you're getting your town taxes raised. When, if you got enough money to do it, you should then share the sales tax, being that it is a result of the direct investments in infrastructure made by the towns. So now you earmark the money, which is what I would really make sure is happening. Make sure the money's only going back to infrastructure and capital improvement. So it just becomes like a never-ending circle where we could continue to make sure your tax bill and my tax bill, well, I guess not my tax bill, right?
The indirect tax bill
of a renter, right?
Yes.
Who's, by the way, I still think just as important as somebody who's paying their tax bill at town hall, but you're making sure their very local tax is not being raised. So I think it's a great initiative. But part of that initiative that is amazing is we saw the largest cut to the property tax levy in county history. And that's big. That's going to be tax relief at the county tax bill. That's going to be tax relief on your town tax bill with this initiative where it hits the most home. And what I'd like to do is we continue to strive to lower taxes, and as we continue to strive to create jobs and economic development, I want to protect the backbones of our community. And so one thing I'll be introducing to the floor of the legislature is going to be a property tax levy cap for seniors. So for people over 65, I want to now the largest cut, let's keep it that way to the property tax. We'll cap it for our backbone of our community, who are also the most vulnerable.
Is that the most predominant of the demographic, the older
They make up like about 22% of our county.
Okay.
But they really do. And they're all getting pushed out. And if we lost them, for starters, fiscally, losing 22% of your taxpayers is a massive blow. But also, just from a regular standpoint, right? It's like how I want to be able to live here and raise a family here. When I do that, I also don't want to get thrown out because I can't afford it here, right? So I want to be able to, we're going to protect them. That's what I'd like to do. I'd like to cap the property tax levy for 65 plus, and then we'll just continue on the path of cutting taxes, and we'll continue on the path of job creation so that everybody, working families can feel the relief as well.
Today's episode is sponsored by Chairman Fannin and the Carmel Republican Committee. Want to make a real difference in Carmel and Mahopac? Join the movement shaping your hometown's future. Follow the Carmel GOP on Facebook to stay informed, get involved, and help strengthen the Republican voice right here at home. I also want to talk about the Putnam County Golf Course. The county has acquired this facility and its financial standing. Could you tell us more about this?
So they paid off their bonds, and they not only beat hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest by paying this bond off early. What this does is it removes these very harsh federal regulations that are tied into these bonds. So meaning we now really have full control of our property. One thing personally I would like to see and explore is enter a land lease agreement. This is something that actually, believe it or not, T-Bar and Grill, that's where our friend Kevin O'Keefe had his fundraiser. I know some of the owners there, and one thing I was told was the town of Yorktown owns that land. But what happens is they pay a lease to the town of Yorktown. They're unable to unleash their private equity into developing that, what was literally just a lot of grass. I mean, my whole life, since I was born, there's been nothing there. They've turned it into a beautiful golf course, a restaurant that is slammed all the time. I think what it does is when you're budgeting in a government, you have to be pretty conservative about stuff like that, like a golf course or restaurants, whatnot. You lease it out, and you can have private equity unleashed into it. They can make investments that our county shouldn't, right? Because it would just make no sense to burden the homeowners that way. And what will happen is you'll get a lease paid every month. First, you're clearing the overhead of what is pretty expensive to maintain a golf course. You're clearing that overhead. You're taking in money from the lease, and now you're generating, I would assume, more revenue in sales tax, because someone who's going to make large investments, into this golf course, it's going to generate more business for it. That's an idea. I've kind of been inspired by what they're doing in York. I think Yorktown, by the way, does a phenomenal job with commerce and does a phenomenal job just generating business. I mean, it's impressive what they do over there.
Reduces the tax burden for their constituents.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's listen, Yorktown is still, not a cheap place to live, but they're striving there. They have so much business. They have a lively economy, a lively community, and we without turning into Westchester County or Yorktown, we're Putnam County. We're going to stay that way. There's a few things I think that you could learn from watching other governments, and it's not being lazy and again, like I said before, accepting the status quo. You got to go through things line by line and say, where can we make an improvement? So that's one thing I saw them doing over in Yorktown, and I think that's something that we could potentially introduce here at the golf course.
As anyone that has watched or listened to Brett's interview, you know that he spoke in great length, and I mean that in a literal sense. I did fact check myself, and he does hold the record for the longest interview thus far.
Well, that doesn't surprise me, but with the amount of questions you've asked me today, we might have him beat. We'll see what happens at the end of this.
Could you tell the voters, between the both of you, what do you disagree on in regard to main subject matters?
I think we were on the right side of a lot of issues together, but again, it's philosophically how will we approach government. He's a Democrat and I'm a Republican, and I think that should tell you all you need to know when it comes to operating a legislative body that we're not talking social issues here. We're not talking anything that really drives someone out left or drives someone out right, but we're rather talking budgetary. I am conservative. I am Republican. That is always what I've been. I will wear that proudly. And I think my approach to government will be with Republican and conservative philosophy. And also, where I may disagree with him is, like my grandfather said, show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. When you're riding in golf carts with Greg Elner, when you're koozying up with the good old boys club to try and suck off votes here and there wherever you can, get help from whoever you look. I get it. You got to win an election. They say politics makes for interesting bedfellows, and you got to make as many friends as you can, because there's plenty of enemies. I've seen, at least myself firsthand, in this. But you can learn from past practices, right? That's what happens. And when you're surrounding yourself with the very people that you claimed you disagreed with, and when you surround yourself with the very people that I am trying to get rid of from our government, I think that should also tell you everything you need to know right there as well.
Before we conclude this episode, are there any other campaign talking points or a final message that you want to share?
I am the only one in this race who is a reformer. I want to reform our government. I ran on that message. If you want to see change in our county government, if you're tired of the good old boys club, if you're tired of the status quo and you want to see change in Putnam County and you want to see our affordability crisis tackled head on, I am your guy for that. I took on the sitting vice chairman of the legislature who stood for everything that I'm not. We beat him in a massive margin. I ask that I earn your vote again, and we could finish this year. We could make changes to our county in a positive way.
What is your website, Facebook, or Instagram account that people can search and learn more about you and your campaign?
It's all going to be Jake for Putnam, so not number 4, FOR. So jake4putnam.com, and then Jake for Putnam is my handles on Facebook and Instagram.
The general election is November 4th. Early voting starts October 25th. There you have it, folks. Jake D'Angelo, candidate for Putnam County Legislator of District 5. It's been great having you on the show.
Likewise.
And if anyone a business owner or individual would be interested in sponsoring future episodes, please reach out to us. Also, if you live in Westchester or Putnam County and would like to come on the show as a guest to discuss any concerns, ideas, or even promote an upcoming event, we'd love to have you. Thank you for watching Beyond the Ballot. Like, subscribe, and leave us your comments. Thank you.